Hey guys, welcome to another episode of What's Up Doc. Today we're really privileged and happy to have with us an NHS physician. For those of you who don't know, that is a physician employed in the United Kingdom. But before we have a chat with him, let's have a look at this. Did you know the liver is the only organ that can regenerate itself? That is, if you allow it to. Liver regeneration is a very complex and well-orchestrated phenomenon where there's signaling of growth factors, cytokines, matrix remodeling, and several feedback mechanisms to send signals for growth. It manages to not only restore its size, but it does this at the same time that it provides full support for body homeostasis. It's no secret what the most common thing is that can affect this process of regeneration. Every single time your liver filters alcohol, some liver cells die. And yes, the liver can develop new cells, but prolonged alcohol misuse over years can reduce its ability to regenerate. Fatty liver is the most common type of alcoholic liver disease. Fat builds up in the liver and stops it from working properly. About 1/3 of people with fatty liver will develop mild or moderate inflammation of the liver known as hepatitis, which may not even present with symptoms at first. Chronic hepatitis can lead to liver scarring or cirrhosis because alcohol prevents you from removing scar tissue, and this happens in about 1 in 5 heavy drinkers. And of course, chronic liver disease is unfortunately a risk factor for liver cancer. All the way from the United Kingdom, sharing some of his knowledge with us here in Trinidad and Tobago about his experiences, and his name is Dr. Veer Gupta. Welcome, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, Tonya. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. I am very excited to talk to you just about a different side of things, a different side of medicine, a different perspective to share with us here. Before we get into all of it, just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about how you got into medicine and how you got into, well, the field of internal medicine where you're practicing now.
Well, yeah. Once again, thank you for having me on the show. So I'm a physician in the United Kingdom. I practice general medicine and general practice. I'm in my final year of my residency training, but I've been doing mini specialization in cardiovascular and respiratory as well. So that's my specialist interest in the general medicine field. How I practice medicine? Well, I come from a family of doctors. I'm second generation medic. And I went to medical school in Ireland with you.
Yes.
You were a few years ahead of me, or 1 year ahead of me, I
Probably
think.
Just one, yeah, I think so.
yeah, 1 year ahead of me. After that, I worked in Dublin, and then I worked in Singapore, and then I did a bit of non-clinical work, but sort of medicine work in the United Nations in New York, and then I worked in London. So I got into training over here in the field of general practice and general medicine. And it so happened that during my training, we had to deal with a worldwide pandemic. And so things got very interesting. And I went into a lot of media work and started doing a lot of media work to sort of inform people of what's going on, because it was a period of time when everybody was very scared and very uninformed about what was happening. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to sort of talk to people about what's going on in the world in terms of medicine.
Tell us, I mean, Trinidad is a few months behind the UK in terms of infection rate, in terms of waves of the virus. And, you know, we kind of had the bigger countries like the UK and the US to look at before we made certain decisions and to kind of know what to expect. So tell me a little bit about what the COVID infection rate or what it's like now, including just how the Delta variant and some of the other variants are behaving in the country now.
Yeah, so I mean, COVID, you know, we know how the history of COVID, we know how it started. It started in a small town in China spread to about 192 countries within 3 months. It was on our shores before we expected it, and we were woefully unprepared for it. And I think most healthcare systems in the world were completely unprepared for it. We'd always been hearing about this thing about a pandemic and about bird flu and H1N1 and all of this in the last 10 years, but we didn't realize how it could just arrive on our doorstep and affect the people in our country, in the West and in countries where we're so used to just taking things for granted. And then suddenly we were in lockdown. So March of 2020, April of 2020, when the United Kingdom went into lockdown, it was unprecedented. I think since the World War, people had not seen this kind of experience, something like this, where you have to stay in your homes because of a fear of an invisible enemy. And I think that really drove it home to people how important it is to understand what we're dealing with. In the last 1.5 years, we've had a lot of research done into the coronavirus. It was a novel virus, so it was never seen before in the world. So we had to sort of start from scratch. And, all the medical treatments that we had, all the vaccination that came out was already being researched for many years before. But then this is the time when we sort of accelerated the use of these medications and bringing them out to sort of save lives. So I think we've had a huge scientific sort of acceleration in what we have discovered in the last 1.5 year due to the pandemic. And I think that's going to help us for future pandemics in years to come.
So, we're talking about COVID infection itself, right? Tell me a little bit about your experience on the wards as a doctor in this time where the COVID infection has been rampant, and just the severity of the disease and the impacts it has had on the healthcare system.
Yeah, so when we first got our first cases in the UK, in London, we started with a few cases, which then went up very, very fast. At that time, we didn't have proper PPE. We didn't know what we were dealing with. But what we saw was that patients were coming in with severe lung infection, severe requirements for oxygen. They were not able to breathe. They were having infection symptoms that were beyond everything that we have seen. And then we also saw that patients were being infected in other organs, like their nervous system, the taste and smell, mental issues. There was depression, anxiety happening in patients that were infected with COVID, hair fall, skin changes. And it was like something that we'd never seen. And for a flu infection to be this, this sort of substantially in terms of all the organs that it affects, I've never seen anything like that in my medical practice or sort of learned about it in medical school. So it was definitely something that we were dealing with, which we immediately knew is something new. And we had to step up and we had to sort of evolve as we learned about the virus, because the virus is evolving. So we had to evolve. I remember when I saw my first case in the hospital, I was very scared. I didn't know what I was dealing with. The patient was coughing. I had just a simple face surgical mask on. We didn't even have proper PPE at the time. And I was trying to put a suprapubic catheter into the patient. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get infected. Yeah. And I did, actually. I got infected. I was admitted to the same hospital where I work because I have asthma. So I needed a bit of oxygen support. And it sort of drove home to me, how serious this virus is. Because for 14 days, I couldn't move. I was coughing. I was sick. I had substantial hair fall. I had, it was just like, I didn't have the motivation or the will to do anything at that point. But luckily, I was under the care of some good doctors, some good respiratory doctors. And they started sort of steroids on me very early. Even before it was researched that it would help in COVID patients. And I sort of recovered very fast from that. And then going down the line, obviously, we learned more about the medications that we can use to protect patients and help them and prevent them from getting into the ICU. Because, once they get into the ICU, I've seen patients that have been on ventilator support for 45 days, 1 month, 2 months, and eventually they don't make it out. So it's a very deadly disease, and we've learned a lot more about it in the last 1.5 years. But I think we have a lot more to learn and how to prevent such pandemics from happening in the future.
And I mean, it's so educational to hear from someone who has been in one of the places that was not only most affected as a doctor, but also as a patient. And, you know, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about how things have developed in terms of vaccinations and just the appeal for people to be vaccinated. But before we do that, we're just going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to What's Up Doc. We're talking to NHS physician Dr. Veer Gupta. He's been at the front line, been at the center of this COVID pandemic, one of the many, many doctors, unfortunately, and has had, I don't want to say the privilege, but has had the experience to be on both sides of the infection. So you really can't hear it from anybody better. Dr. Gupta, let's get back into, we're talking about the infection, and we're talking about what next. The world has been lucky to present to us or to have been presented with vaccinations. But unfortunately, the road to have people vaccinated has not gone as smoothly as probably some of us would have expected. Tell us a little bit about what vaccination is like in the UK right now, because in Trinidad, we're still in the process of sort of getting to where we should or we would like to be.
Yeah, you know, vaccination has been such a big issue in the last 1 year, and I don't think vaccination as a topic has been discussed more than it has been discussed in the last 1.5 years. It's always been a topic of debate in the Western world, in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, because a lot of people, there's been an inherent distrust of vaccination for many, many years, you know, whether it is the MMR vaccine, whether it is the other diseases that we deal with. But I don't think that anyone has discussed it as much as it has been discussed due to COVID. And I think that's a really good thing. You know, vaccination is very important to protect us from disease. It gives us the antibodies that we need to fight a particular disease, especially diseases that have never been seen in the public before, like the coronavirus. Vaccination for COVID has been in research for a number of years. It's you know, a lot of people have this misconception that it was developed overnight when the disease came into being, but that's not true. Scientists have been working on a disease like this, on a pandemic like this, for 10 to 15 years. And you know, the mRNA vaccine, for instance, Moderna, Pfizer, they've been in research in the labs for about 10 to 15 years, so that when we reach a moment like this, we have something that we can fight this with. You know, this is our weapon. This is our sword that we're fighting the virus with. Otherwise, we're going to go in without any weapon, and we're going to get sick, and we're going to get into ICU, and we're going to, you know, have multiple illnesses due to the virus. So this is the way we're protecting ourselves and our bodies from this virus. And it's so important that people understand that this is the only way going forward, because we can't be going into lockdowns and coming out of lockdowns and then going back into lockdowns as the cases go up. And now, if you look at the world today, the world is divided into two sections. You know, much like it was during the Cold War, there was blocks of countries. Now it is a different type of war that we're fighting, and it's divided into the vaccinated world versus the unvaccinated world. And I think that going forward, if you look at the way the vaccinated world is doing at the moment, for instance, in the United Kingdom, where 70% of the population is fully vaccinated, you know, we've sort of had a chance to experience what normal life is like all over again. You know, we're back into schools, we're back into universities, we're back into stadiums, concerts. Things are getting back to normal all over again because people have come forward and vaccinated themselves. And what vaccination does, and that's very important to understand, that vaccination will not protect you from getting the virus, because the virus has so many variants. It can affect you, it can infect you, even if you're vaccinated. But what it does is it protects you from getting escalated disease, going into the ICU, and eventually dying from the virus. And that's why, if you look at the numbers in the United Kingdom in the past 1 year, you know, you'll see, you just have to Google it, you'll see the graph. And back in December, when we didn't have any vaccinations going on, there were people dying by the thousands every day. Thousands. You know, 1,200 people were dying in December every single day from coronavirus in a developed country like the United Kingdom. And now that number has come down to less than 100 because people are vaccinated. They're able to protect themselves from the disease. So if that doesn't tell you that vaccinations work, I don't know what will. So we're going to talk about this more, but I think I'm so passionate about this subject. I want people to understand that vaccinations are there to protect you. They're there to help you fight this disease and not end up in a vulnerable situation. I'm part of an obstetric and gynecology team at the moment, and unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago we had a young pregnant woman who passed away from the virus after giving birth to her baby because she was unvaccinated, because she thought that the vaccine would affect her baby. And eventually what happened was that the baby was born, but she passed away of COVID about a couple of weeks after her giving birth. So I think we have to really understand the dangers of this virus, and people need to realize how important it is. But we also have to deal with the vaccine inequality that is happening in the world today. And
what do you have to say about false data and false interpretation of so-called facts?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. And it's not only limited to, the United States. It's happening everywhere in the world. I have friends in the Middle East who message me every day who say that, on WhatsApp, we're getting all these forwards from people saying vaccination can give you all sorts of diseases. It can give you all sorts of problems. It can kill your baby. It can cause problems in pregnancy. All of this is misinformation, really, because until you have scientific evidence of something which has been peer reviewed in a scientific journal, and you have evidence of the research that has gone behind it, WhatsApp has become the new sort of means of people to understand what's going on, and which is so dangerous. I think it's more than anything, it's dangerous for people to use this kind of information to try and make the decision about what they're going to do with their health. I want to come back to the point you made about vaccination. When you have information that is being given through people that are not medically aware of the situation, I think it's very dangerous. I always say this to my patients, if you can trust the medical fraternity to treat you once you have COVID and you come into the hospital, and you trust whatever medication we're giving you at that point, why don't you trust us when we're telling you to take the vaccine, which will prevent you from getting into hospital? And that's so important. And yeah, I remember now the point you made. The case numbers are going up. Why are the case numbers going up if you've been vaccinated? Well, the reason for that is that we've gotten better at testing. We've gotten so much better at testing than when we first started testing for the virus. The improvements in the testing process, the kits, even in our hospital now, testing used to take about 2 days to come back. Then it took 1 day. Now it's taking 1 hour to get back. So I think we've gotten better. The science has improved. We've understood the virus more. So the numbers are being reported more. But there are countries where numbers are not being reported, and the virus is spreading, freely in the population that is unvaccinated. So, Absolutely. As I said, we're dealing with two different worlds right now on the same planet.
Just to finish up, Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, is one of the countries in the third world that has been given the vaccines almost last on the list. And there's been a lot of controversy surrounding which vaccine to take, and a lot of hesitancy, because I think we started off with AstraZeneca, a limited supply of AstraZeneca, and then we were given the Sinopharm vaccine, and there was so much hesitation. Now that we have the Johnson & Johnson, as well as the Pfizer, which is only for select population, there's a little bit more people coming forward, but we're still at 30 to 40% vaccination. What would you say about, just vaccine hesitancy, especially as it pertains to the unfair distribution of vaccines?
Yeah, so the unfair distribution of vaccine is a big issue. There's multiple issues in this, actually, to be honest. One of them is a lot of countries deciding which vaccine to trust more than the other. There's been debates about whether, say, a Chinese or an Indian or a Russian vaccine is going to work the same way as an American or a British vaccine. And so should we be using the American and British vaccines more than we should be using the Chinese and the Russian vaccines? And that all has to do with the transparency of data coming out of those countries in terms of their production of their vaccines. So I can totally understand where this sort of hesitancy comes from on which vaccine to use. And I think that, this is the reality of the world we live in at the moment, unfortunately. There are countries that are going to get their populations vaccinated fast. There are countries that are going to struggle. Countries in the European Union struggled to get their populations vaccinated because there was no European Union vaccine. It was either a British or an American or Chinese, Russian, or Indian. And I think Australia, New Zealand, all of these countries, which are sort of developed countries, have struggled to get their populations vaccinated. So I can imagine what's happening in sort of the lesser developed countries in different parts of the world. And I think this is the biggest challenge we're going to face in 2022 and 2023 coming down the line is how are we going to get the vaccine to the people that need it most in those countries? Because until we don't have that population vaccinated, we cannot open our world to everybody. You know, we're still going to have lockdowns. We're still going to have restrictions, travel restrictions, testing, quarantining, and all of that kind of stuff. And this is a challenge. This is a challenge for every industry in the world. I think the only answer to this is that we have to sort of publicize very well that people need to come forward and take whatever vaccine is available so that they get the antibodies to fight the virus. People need to come forward and trust the science behind these vaccines. And, you know, it'll have to be dependent on the United Nations and different governments to make a pact where, for instance, COVAX, which is a program that is started by the WHO and United Nations to provide vaccines to countries in Africa, to South America, and so on and so forth, to sort of provide the ability for these people to get vaccinated. But it's going to be a lengthy process. It's going to be something that people need to sort of, especially in the developed countries, need to take very seriously. And start helping out other countries in doing this.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, it's the next challenge that we're going to face.
Yeah, vaccine equity. But, you know, I think you've been very helpful in terms of providing a little bit of education from a different perspective, because, I mean, everybody's hearing it from the government, they're hearing it from different people in position, but just to hear it from the doctors who are not being paid in a position to tell you anything. We're literally telling you this from the goodness of our hearts, and especially somebody from in the NHS, in the middle of the pandemic, in one of the countries that has been very majorly affected. So hopefully, I think that you've helped some people in Trinidad to understand a little bit better about what we're dealing with, and we have felt very privileged and honored to have you on the show today. So thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully it won't be the last time.
Thank you very much, Tonya. It's been my privilege to be on your show, and yes, hopefully it will not be the last time. I hope to see you again.
For sure. Guys, this was Dr. Gupta, NHS physician, talking to us about internal medicine in the UK, his journey, and a little bit about COVID and vaccinations. See you next time here on What's Up Doc.
I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Katie C, and she's from Healing Queens. She's brought the world of dancing in heels and popularized it here in Trinidad and Tobago. So Katie, welcome.
Hi, Tonya. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your brand, Healing Queens.
So Healing Queens is a platform catered for women, made by women. I started the company because I found that there weren't enough movement for women, a space for women to join together, become fit, dance, have fun, let loose, forget their troubles at the door, and
just have fun.
And have fun. Yeah, we're here 4 years now, so.
Absolutely. So, I mean, as I always say, men have their platforms. Men are able to play sports, women too. But it's a little bit more accepted and commonplace for men to play sports, go out and play football, have sweat, play cricket. And sometimes women neglect the aspect of the importance of physical activity as a group, and a very feminine physical activity. So tell us a little bit about what Healing Queens entails. What type of movement is it?
So Healing Queens is a dance company which we do heels dancing, which is a fusion between jazz technique and burlesque styles. Also, it mixes in some of my own interpretation of dance. So I can do contemporary, I can do hip hop, I can do pop, I can do soca. My style mainly deals with the jazz and the burlesque techniques of it. It's fun, it's sensual, it's sexy, it's a good old time.
Nice. So, I mean, we're talking a little bit about fitness here.
Does it keep you fit? Is there cardiovascular activity in it? Is that important for you to teach to your girls?
Of course. So I am a dancer, trained dancer, first of all. So my classes always start out with a good warm-up. You're not going into your pumps until you warm up. 1, 2, dancing in heels. Ooh, let me tell you something. It is not an easy task to look sexy, composed, elegant. So yes, definitely your legs are going to get strong. You're going to get a nice, good core. The booty's going to look good too.
But I mean, when we go to FET and we go to Lime, we have on heels.
We have on our heels.
How is it a little different to that?
Well, I put structure to it. So we're not just jumping and waving, looking good. We do have structured choreography, catered towards the technique, catered towards the fitness element, catered towards just being sexy and owning your body.
Right. So stronger legs, more
Stronger
fit.
legs, more fit, yes. And of course, you take those elements and you can have fun in a party with it. I know some of my clients will go to a FET, they hear a song that we've done,
Choreo!
and they do the choreo.
Absolutely. You're going to show us a few steps?
Yes, of course. You're going to take 4 walks in an 8 count.
Right.
You're going to start with the ankles together, toes apart, and this is called a bevel.
Yeah.
So you don't want any spaces between your legs.
Gotcha.
Nice. So that knee goes to the opposite corner. Then 4 walks. The back leg is going to glide along the floor. So you don't want to pick the foot up. Those are stylized walks.
Right.
Technical walks would be gliding the foot along the floor.
Oh, that's so difficult.
Yes.
I love a little pickup. But
I
go
know,
ahead.
but those are stylized walks.
Gotcha.
Also, you're going to pull up.
Gotcha.
Nice. So engage in that pelvic floor muscle.
Nice.
Suck yourself through a straw.
Uh-huh.
So you're nice and tall. Nice. So 4 walks in an 8 count. Ready? 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, step, 3, 4, step, 5, 6, step, 7, 8. Nice. Then you're going to step out to the side. Nice strong stance. You're going to go down, keep the chin up so you have a nice arch back. 4 counts. 1, 2, 3. Drop the head on 4. Pick the head up on 5. 5, 6, 7. And you pull that left leg into your bevel. 8. Hey! You look great.
Fantastic. That was really exciting. And I'm sure your girls have so much fun.
So much fun.
Not as easy as it looks, guys, because walking in heels, although we walk normally with them, is a little bit more difficult with this technique, but so much fun. Stay tuned for next time here with KDC from Healing Queens.